Good evening. Welcome to tonight's edition of FSU Weather Right Now. You can see this is a special edition looking live at the severe weather situation rapidly developing in Alabama right now. Of course, we streamed earlier when we were looking at the high-risk situation in Alabama right now. Now we have a new setup here with a line coming in. We are still under a high risk right now. This risk has not diminished. The SPC has chosen to remain at a high risk, which means that we are looking at a chance of potentially even more tornadoes tonight. Right now we have a line here, but the storm I'm particularly concerned about is this one right just south of Clinton near Deatsville and right now in Autauga County. This storm is moving off towards the north and northeast at about 60 miles per hour. But what I'm concerned about is this hook echo right here. We don't know if there's a tornado on the ground here or a tornado at all right now, and it's not warned yet. But we are seeing a considerable amount of rotation with this storm, and we are a little concerned about this. So it's moving off towards the north-northeast at about, like I said, 60 miles per hour. So you guys in Dollar, you guys in Sycamore, Alexander City, keep watching this storm. Like I said, it is not tornado warned. The National Weather Service has not decided to warn this yet, but I'm sure they are also looking at this as this is a little bit of a particularly concerning storm right now. Again, moving off towards the north-northeast. So this is probably the first storm that we're looking at right now. Activity, as you probably know if you're in Alabama and Mississippi, was there at a lull for a little bit, but we have seen a few tornado-embedded storms pop up across this line. That is really our biggest risk tonight. And as this line makes its way into the high risk here, right where it is right now, we're seeing a lot of embedded, potentially rotation and tornadoes make its way out of these storms. And this is the area of biggest concern right here in Alabama, going south towards this area of this line. Probably the biggest threat for you right now in Thomasville and Jackson with the severe thunderstorm warning. You can see how this storm is sort of bowing out right here. This is where we have straight line winds that are very strong, and honestly, this could be as damaging as a tornado to many of you because straight line winds can impact a home just as strong as a tornado. So make sure we know that, because if you are on the path of this storm, make sure you are still taking shelter. Thomasville, Cavalry, Alberta, within the next 20 to 30 minutes, you guys will probably be under the strength of this storm. So make sure you are in a safe shelter, you are in the storm. And again, like I said, there is a tornado threat with these sort of lines here. It's not the sort of classic supercell look that we've seen earlier and that storm I showed you ahead of the front, but we are still looking for embedded tornadoes, which honestly might be even more dangerous because they're embedded, they're harder to see, harder to predict, they're rain wrapped, and there's a potential here of maybe it being a strong tornado. Like we said, this is a good, in fact, we're going to that storm right now in Autauga County. We do have a tornado warning on that storm now. It has not popped up on my system yet, but it has popped up on our max here. And as you can see, it's moving off towards the north-northeast. You guys in Marbury, Billingsley, Rockford, you guys need to be watching this storm right now. Get into your safe areas immediately. Titus, make sure you are in your rooms now. Do not wait to see this storm. This is during the night, so it'll be hard to see. Make sure you are taking all precautions, taking your children, taking your family. Go to the lowest interior room right now. And right now, we are again watching this storm. There's quite a bit of rotation down here, so I'm going to pass it off to Zach to look at a little bit more of this storm and the dynamics of it and why we're so concerned about it right now. So Zach, what does this storm look like to you?
Well, you know, it does have that classic kind of supercell shape. And just here, as you said, south of Billingsley, you can start to see kind of the hook echo here. I'm going to zoom in here just south of Billingsley so you guys can get a little bit better picture. This isn't our high-resolution radar, it's our Mosaic for the national, but you can still really see right there towards Vida. See that little notch right there in the line just north of Vida? Let me get the little thing here so I can kind of point. Here we go. Right where the arrow is, this little notch right here is actually an inflow notch. And so basically that is all the warm, moist air kind of feeding into the system. Now this back part right here, this is where your potential tornado could develop. It's called a mesocyclone. Basically, it's the top part of the cloud that descends lower than the rest and starts the spinning process. So the big spin is going to be in that back hook area. And we would expect one of these little appendages to be where the tornado would form, if there would be one. So Joffrey over there towards Posey's Crossroads, and of course right there in Vida, things may be really quiet right now. Maybe you're hearing some thunder, but it's not really raining. But you could be in the path of a potentially large tornado here very soon. Once again, we don't have a confirmation on the tornado yet. It just got warned, but that shape is really concerning to me. It could certainly be on its way. Let me go ahead and zoom out here again. let's take a closer look at where this storm could be going. So the other thing about this too, you'll notice that when the storm travels, it's moving in this northeasterly direction, and most of the precipitation with this storm is all out here in front of it. So Clanton over towards Marbury, you guys are going to be seeing heavy rain, maybe some hail, maybe some damaging winds, and then you think that's it. But the tornado is actually behind all of that. So the potential tornado could be behind a whole wall of rain, wind. You won't hear or see it coming before it's too late. So that is another thing that makes these nocturnal high precipitation type storms oh so dangerous. Let me go ahead and draw this tracker out here once again, kind of on the leading edge of this line, and then following. Storms are going right around 50 to 60 miles an hour here to the north and the east. So yeah, 837 in Clanton, 844 in Dollar, 853 in Gold Branch, and 9 o'clock or so in Hanover if the storm holds together. Guys, this is all coming your way right now. If you are at all in these areas, you need to be taking shelter. Let me go ahead and expand that a little bit just to kind of fill for the watch. So here we just got a new update in really quickly before I go down here. This is another thing that's super concerning to me. We have a little dot right here, which could be nothing. It could be a bad sign, spot in the radar, or it could be a potential tornado and, inflow literally wrapping around the system. So if indeed this is a tornado, once again, heavy precipitation could be surrounding the tornado, and the tornado itself kind of being literally shielded by a curtain of rain. This is a really bad case situation for anyone down here, especially if you're in a mobile home or some kind of other unfortified structure. Once again, if you are in one of these areas and you don't have a safe place to go, you want to make sure you get to a safe shelter. So, whether that's a neighbor's house that maybe is made out of brick or stone, or a local fire department, a local police station, anything like that, somebody who is in your area, you need to try to find somewhere close to you that you can take shelter from this storm, because a mobile home is not the place to be, especially during a tornado situation like this. Let me go ahead and play this one more time here. I'm going to go ahead and expand this out again just to look at the warning. Let's get this all the way over here so I can kind of get on the edge. Once again, right around that 55 to 60 mile an hour range. Yeah, so now 9:05 p.m. We're also including, like I said, Rockford up towards Goodwater. So you guys have about half an hour. If the storm holds together, the environment certainly is conducive for these long-tracked, long-lived tornadoes. We could see anywhere between Marbury up towards Rockford and then eventually to Goodwater. This is potentially half an hour of lead time for you guys. You have a couple minutes, call the people you care about, get your children, your pets inside. If you have a safe place to be, this is the time to start making those preparations and heading to your safe spot. Obviously, you have less time if you're closer to this storm, but this is nothing to fool around with, and it's nothing to go outside and try to look at. Trust me, you're not going to see anything. As a meteorologist, I would love to go out and look at the storm, but there's literally going to be nothing to see but rain until you're already in a situation that is all too dangerous. Let's go ahead and zoom out here again. Talk a little bit more about the pattern before I pass things off. Here to the south, we're starting to see a kind of interesting system set up, more linear in nature, and as Robert alluded to earlier, and he can talk about this, this is called a quasi-linear convective system. Basically, it's a big squall line full of heavy rain and wind. Right now, we'll go ahead and put this out. I'll draw the timer for this. And let's draw it all the way down there. This whole thing right now is severe thunderstorm warned, and it's moving right around that 60 mile an hour or so I'll back that off. Yeah, so, several areas, of course, Thomasville, you guys are in the fun for this, as well as Monroeville by around 9 o'clock, so we're talking about half an hour out. And Lucedale, of course, you guys only have about 5 or 6 minutes, so you're hearing the thunder if you're already not seeing the wind. So this entire line is going to continue to move to the east, right around that 50 to 60 mile an hour range. I-65, if you're traveling between Montgomery down towards the Gulf and I-10 tonight, this is something to definitely keep an eye on. It is heading your way. These winds are fast enough, they will knock a tractor trailer or any other high-profile vehicle off the road. So something definitely to keep in mind there. Go ahead and erase this, and we'll take one last zoom out here, and I'll let the whole system play. Let's tilt ourselves up here so we can see things a little bit better. Numerous severe thunderstorm watches now. It seems like we may be starting to transition to a little bit of that high wind threat. But overall, definitely tornadoes still possible, and especially in these little squall lines and little discrete cells ahead of that line. All right, so let's go ahead and talk to Chandler. I think he's got some information from us from the internet and some reports we might have seen around the area.
That is right. We've had a multitude of reports, 21 total tornado reports. Of course, this is preliminary, so there may be more, there may be less. However, we right now can say that there are potentially 21 separate tornadic incidents that we can blame this outbreak for. Most of them are concentrated around that central Alabama, close between Tuscaloosa and Birmingham, like we saw earlier today, where we had this train of storms that just kept on barreling through between those two cities. And of course, right south of that, we had more issues when right between Selma and Demopolis. They both had their own scares, and in between them, the smaller communities even, they've had multitudes of issues as well with these tornadic supercells. And that's not all. That is, of course, the main threat, tornadoes. But we've had 64 reports of wind damage, all associated with that gust front, like Zach was mentioning. This extremely strong squall line is extremely dangerous in its own right, even without factoring in the tornadoes. This is still an extremely dangerous event, and it will carry through the night. And we also see that there's some hail reports as well, 39 hail reports. So even still, there's still, of course, you have the tornadoes and the wind, but with these supercells, they can produce pretty sizable hailstones. Of course, don't have exactly what diameter most of them are. However, they are variable. I've seen from 1 inch all the way up to 2 inches so far. So this has been an extremely severe event, both in terms of tornadoes, in terms of wind and hail. And we've also been talking about high water rescue. So there is still flooding also. So this has just been a hodgepodge of craziness. Unfortunately, it had to happen on St. Patrick's Day as well. But it's unfortunate it had to happen, period. We also want to emphasize places like Selma and Tuscaloosa, where they've been hit, or they've been at least scared multiple times. I know that there were multiple confirmed touchdowns also in Tuscaloosa area. And we're not over, we're not done. This will carry through the night, of course. We're looking at one of the models, the HRRR. It has this storm leaving the Alabama area somewhere around the 3 a.m. mark. So by that point, you should be through the darkness. And thankfully, it will move out of the Alabama region. However, that is not when we're out of the clear. However, because we're looking at Georgia and the Carolinas, they have their own major threat. If we can bring up that Day 2 outlook, we have a big outlook for the southeast as well, more of the eastern southeast. So we see on the model, or the imagery, that we have a moderate outlook. Moderate, of course, it kind of is a little bit of a false name. This is a level 4 out of 5, so we have a major potential storm that will bring some potential major damage for areas from Augustus, Georgia, all the way up to Raleigh, North Carolina. And then, of course, looking at that enhanced, that stretches all the way from Virginia down to Florida. So again, we have those potentials for multitudes of more reports, but from tornadoes to hail and more so even wind. And I know that with tomorrow's events, it will mostly be a wind-related event as well, which is a major threat for the Carolinas and Georgia. But I guess I can toss things back off to Robert to talk about the warnings that are ongoing in Alabama.
Right, exactly. We have a situation here developing. We have many warnings right now. Most of these are still severe thunderstorm warnings, but there is one tornado warning, as we were talking earlier, in Autauga County, moving off towards the north-northeast. We are watching all of this area in the Pds Tornado Watch here because it was actually reissued as a Pds Tornado Watch, which means the National Weather Service is extremely confident that there will be some, maybe potentially long-tracked and long-lived tornadoes here tonight, which is why we're so concerned here, because this is during the night, and it's even harder to see a tornado, not even talking about the fact that it's hard to see a tornado in Dixie Alley already. Wednesday until 9:15 is what we're looking at for this tornado warning here. This storm seems to be fairly healthy storm-wise right now, so it doesn't seem like it's going to fall apart right now. which means that it could be a threat for Watauga County going into Elmore County and other areas off to the points north-northeast. So we're going to continue watching this storm for you. And to sort of contextualize what's going on right now with all this sort of system here, we have two threats that we're sort of seeing here. During the day today and the high risk that brought us over, I believe, 60 tornado warnings today, the major round one as we were talking about, we were really seeing a lot of these sort of storms right here, these sort of supercellular, sort of removed from the line storms that sort of bubble up here. But tonight, we're having a sort of dual mode threat. We're seeing these storms bubble up out here, which are my concern. As these storms bubble up down here and they start to move their way north-northeast, they could sort of gain this cape here and get into this very high shear environment that could help them to become very strong tornadoes. That's not guaranteed, of course, but we are looking at these storms as a potential. But there is a second potential here with this line here, where there are two threats. With this sort of line right here, you're seeing damaging winds. How you see it bows out right here, all the way down from the I-59, I-10 near New Orleans, going all the way up to the north here. You are seeing a damaging wind threat because this bow just sort of shows you how well formed this storm is, because it has these very high winds that pack a punch that honestly rivals some tornadoes, which is why we're live right now, not because of just the tornado threat, but this damaging winds threat, which could be damaging many homes in this area right now. But another threat is, particularly where you see this line sort of bow in a little bit, we could see some embedded tornadoes again. The tornadoes with this system here and areas potentially like this. Right now, we're not saying this area is a tornado risk, but we're seeing large rotation in this area and many other areas along this line that is not necessarily tight enough to be a tornado yet. But right now, we're seeing a lot of storms in here. So again, we're watching a major multimodal system right now, and we're seeing a major system that could bring a lot of damaging winds and a tornado threat. So we're going to keep our eye on this storm right here. But I'm going to pass it off to Chandler, who has some more news about today's weather outbreak and more of what these earlier 60 tornado warnings have done to this region.
That's right, yes. Well, first I would like to highlight we have some news from NWS Mobile. They're talking about a bow echo, the bow echo that is racing across parts of Mississippi into Alabama. It has seen a recent uptick in intensity, and now winds are up to about 70 miles per hour, which are pretty great, very strong winds. So that means if you are at all have anything outside that you want to take inside to make sure that it stays safe, that's what you need to do ahead of this bow echo. And I would say that the bow echo should leave sometime, of course, with Alabama, it should leave about 3 a.m. We're looking at, for tomorrow's threat, it should begin sometime around in the morning hours for parts of Georgia, getting into eastern Georgia and parts of South Carolina, and it'll carry on into the afternoon. So of course, if you're listening to this and you're not yet in the threat, but you are seeing that outlook for tomorrow, and you know that you have a potential to see some severe weather, then I would suggest if you can call off work, call off work. If you can work from home, that would be great. Try to stay out of the most of the mess of it, and just understand that this will bring very strong winds. It will continue to increase in intensity as it reaches Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina later on tomorrow, and rejuvenates with the new energy that is over in that section of the southeast. But again, this is a very major system, and it's brought a lot of storm reports, a lot of damage. We can, I saw an image earlier, unfortunately, of a house that was destroyed, and it was a brick house. And some people have this facade, this idea that a brick house is more sturdy than some of those other houses that we have, you know, plaster. But it's really honestly a fake, it's not something that is really going to help you. For the most part, no matter what structure of the building, there is still the potential that it will be knocked down. And in this case, the whole entire home was caved in. The walls, they were still somewhat standing. However, the whole entire structure above it, all the ceiling, all the upper parts of the wall were crumbled in and towering into the house. So then, it honestly, emphasizes how important it is to get into that interior part of your home so that if everything does crumble around you, you at least have that one section of your house that will be protected from outside elements such as the winds of a tornado. Like we have this one example that's always brought up in years because it's one of the most stark representations of how powerful a tornado is. And it was the image of the straw going through a steel plate. And that is pretty much the summation of what a tornado's wind strength is. It can take something so brittle as straw and shove it through something so strong as steel. We think of steel, we think of it as impenetrable. You think of not Iron Man, Superman, excuse me. You think of, oh wow, he's the steel dude. But steel, it can be destroyed just by this tornado, and it emphasizes how important it is to really take these precautions and stay safe. But for now, I think I'll toss things off to Zach at the Storm Lab to talk more about these warnings across the region.
Yes, thanks. We're going to take another quick look at today before we go into the day tomorrow and talk about that risk there. I'm going to bring up, let me pro up the future radar here. All right, so let me load this right now. What this is showing you is over the next day or so, all this red area, that was a little bit fast. When we come back later, I'll slow this down. That's my bad. Basically, this entire area, as we go through the day, is back up here a little bit. Isn't it kind of cool? When we're after dark, we can kind of slow things down, take you a little bit better through the models here. As we get through the overnight hours tonight, all the red is your CAPE. And CAPE stands for Convective Available Potential Energy. Basically, it's storm fuel. How well is the atmosphere set up to be conducive for these storms? Anywhere between Mobile, Birmingham, over towards Columbus, typically we see these values go down at night. And yes, it does kind of go down, but even at the weakest part of the day, 5 to 6 a.m., you know, the sun has been down for several hours, 8, 9, 10 hours in most places. Atlanta over towards Columbus, there's still a good amount of instability here, especially even north of Birmingham. There's a little pocket there. Now, the model isn't putting any storms in central Tennessee right now, but the instability is there. Now, once this line clears you, you know, it is a cold front, much cooler, drier, and more stable air. So Mobile, Jackson, Birmingham, hopefully by your drive to work tomorrow, things are going to calm down significantly in terms of severe weather. Now let's advance this a few more hours here in advance. Notice as we start getting into the day tomorrow, by 11:30 or so, the line starts to redevelop, and now we're talking about the Carolinas. Cape really starts to redevelop, especially here between the Outer Banks, going down towards the Tidewater, all of these areas, and even central and coastal South Carolina here, really starts to develop the Cape by mid-afternoon, up towards West Virginia, Kentucky, parts of southwestern Virginia. All of these kind of areas here in the mountains can also see that chance of severe weather, mostly damaging winds and some small to medium-sized hail. But, you know, a tornado can't be ruled out just because you are in the mountains. Going home from work tomorrow, central West Virginia over towards Ohio, big flare-up of thunderstorms there, and even in parts of North Carolina. Notice these storms are also kind of looking discrete. The line has kind of broken up, which, you know, this model is now starting to go a little bit farther out in time. We can't tell you county by county exactly where they'll form, but it gives you a good sense of just how the system will set up. And once again, we are seeing potentially tornadic individual supercells anywhere here from Norfolk and Newport News, going down towards Greensboro, Jacksonville, Wilmington, maybe even down towards Myrtle Beach tomorrow. We could be seeing these you know, individualized storms before they push off the coast, finally sometime around that 9 o'clock time frame. So once there is a threat again tomorrow, before I pass it off, I'm going to go right back to the storms, check a look and see if we have any more live active tornado warnings. It appears that one warning was allowed to expire north of Montgomery, which is good. We'll keep an eye on it. These storms usually cycle, right, where they try to put down a tornado or they do put down a tornado for a few minutes or so. Most tornadoes last seconds to only a few minutes. Today's environment was, you know, conceivably much different. Thankfully, you know, this storm looks like it is cycling, Hopefully it will not re-warn, but the environment is certainly conducive for that. Anywhere from Alexander City up there towards Sycamore, certainly some heavy rain, some small hail, definitely lots of lightning, and we'll have to see if it continues to pose any kind of rotation risk. All right, Robert, we're going to zoom things out again here and start talking about some new stuff for people that might have just joined.
Right. If you are just joining us right now, we are on the air for a severe weather outbreak still happening in Alabama. There is still a high risk. The SPC has put here for a chance of tornadoes, large hail, and damaging winds. We are watching a tornado warning for this storm in Autauga County. It has been allowed to expire, but I will say for that storm, I have been watching it for the past few minutes ever since it did expire. It does still present rotation with that storm. So if you're in Alexander City, if you're all the way maybe even as Talladega, anywhere in this area, do not let your guard down. This storm could refire instantly, and we will give that information to you as soon as possible. But if you get a tornado warning earlier than we say, don't just wait. Go immediately to your shelter. I have to say this is one of the biggest threats for tonight, but it's not the only threat. We are, of course, watching this broader line out here for a chance of damaging winds. I'm also a little concerned about particularly these storms over here around Tuscaloosa, Fayette. Seems like they have a little bit of broader rotation with them. Not anything that's going to put down a tornado right now, but I am still concerned that these storms could potentially put down a tornado as they get into this sort of rich environment here that is sort of helping these tornadoes to generate. Also, of course, down here towards the south, as we get towards Demopolis, Thomasville, of course, for our viewers here in Tallahassee, we're referring to Thomasville, Alabama, not Thomasville, Florida, whenever we say Thomasville. So Demopolis, Thomasville, all the way down to maybe even New Orleans, we're looking at this potentially straight line winds damaging threat that could pose a very considerable threat, maybe even almost as high as a tornado. And also, I'd like to mention one more thing. As I was saying earlier, the two main things we're looking at here are the storms out here and the storms over here. One thing I'd like to mention is there are a few bubble ups down here that are starting to sort of gain a little bit of strength. We're going to need to watch them. They might be caught by this line, just sort of weaken a little bit. But some of these, particularly around the city of Troy here, might actually start to strengthen just a little bit. So we're going to have to watch that as they go towards Troy, Alabama. They might actually become strengthened, or maybe Montgomery. So this is going to be something we're going to have to watch. Again, I'm not saying they will strengthen, but I'm saying any of you guys in this area, Selma, Montgomery, Greenville, Troy, Eufaula, don't let your guard down. Just because this storm has sort of seemed to weaken a little bit on the level. We have a high risk here. Many of you guys in Montgomery, in Eufaula, and Troy, you guys are either under moderate or enhanced risks here for severe weather, and the SPC has not just put that here. So we are watching these storms here potentially for maybe a risk of maybe a quick spin up, maybe a severe thunderstorm warning. But again, no matter where you are in the state here, you are at a risk for something right now. You are at risk for damaging winds here. You're at risk for potentially a spin up out here, and maybe even an embedded tornado with this line out here. So make sure you stay tuned for all of these as we continue to update on this. I would say the biggest takeaway from this is please do not let your guard down. We do not want to instill fear. We don't want to hype. That's not what we're doing here. We just want to make sure that no one lets their guard down, because we know we already had a historic outbreak. If you took what happened earlier today, that's already a historic outbreak, already for the record books. We have at least 21 confirmed tornadoes, I believe I heard correctly, that put down in Alabama. But this isn't over yet, so please do not let your guard down. This can be the most vulnerable time. Right now we're looking at this storm. This is the sort of bow echo here we have. This is the sort of biggest damaging winds threat going towards Citronelle, Monroeville, Carloville, Selma. All of you guys, within the next 10 to 20 minutes with this sort of storm system, is going to make its way off towards the east. It's going to move directly east, and this is probably the best organized area of the line. Starting up here, going towards the south, this is the area with the best organization, which means that this is going to be the area with the highest risk for damaging winds, potentially straight line winds coming where you have these severe thunderstorm warnings right here over into the sort of southern Alabama and into southern Mississippi corridor. So now I'm going to pass things off to Chandler to continue talking about more of this system that happened today. As I mentioned, almost 21 tornadoes, maybe even more. We're still looking for confirmations on that, but I'm going to pass things off to Chandler to talk more about what happened today.
That's right, and Selma just can't get a break. I'm looking at the past 48 hours for tornado warnings, and well, for the most part, this is a very, I wish I could show you, but there's this stripe, basically, of tornado warnings, a train of tornado warnings between Meridian, Mississippi, and Montgomery, Alabama. There's just multiple warnings that have trained over parts of South Alabama, like you mentioned, Robert. It's just this entire section of Alabama has been hit multiple times by multiple warned storms. Even if the storm didn't drop a tornado, it still dropped multiple inches of rain, or multiple potential threats for rain and hail. And of course, anytime there's a threat for a tornado, it spikes your anxiety. But now they're looking at straight line wind gusts with this bow echo. And that is a huge threat, because when we talk about having a lot of rainfall in a short amount of time, we talk about having the soil that is already saturated. That causes, once you have wind that comes through, saturated soil will then be easier to basically wiggle. So that means trees will be able to fall over. And so it still means that you should get inside into the interior part of your home, especially if you live by a bunch of big trees. It's just a dangerous situation. So if you live at all in this region that has been hit by multiple of these storms in a train, and you know that the soil is extremely wet, you know that this is going to be a big threat when it comes to this bow echo. So just please get into the interior part of your home as this starts to bear down on you. Looking at the reports, we still have about 21 tornadoes that are preliminarily confirmed. And of course, ratings-wise, we won't know anything about ratings of these tornadoes until the NWS in Birmingham, Mobile, and other National Weather Service offices in Mississippi and Arkansas and Louisiana, until they are able to go and investigate these sites and these locations, they won't know for sure what the ratings of these tornadoes are. But if you were in one of these sites that was warned, or even if you weren't, and you see a bunch of damage and you think it might have been caused by a tornado, contact the NWS office, contact your local NWS office. If you don't know what your local NWS office is, look up nws.org or .gov, and it will show you a map of the United States and pick your region, and you'll be able to figure out your office. Call them or email them and let them know that you see storm damage. They want all the reports that they can gather together so that they can send teams to investigate and try the total of how many tornadoes, how many straight line wind events we've had over the past 24 hours. And so this is a very major event and something that we want to keep well documented so that we can continue to upgrade our models, continue to let them learn from these storms and these systems, and let them be able to build upon this concrete data so that they can be better forecast future events. But now I'm going to toss things back off to Robert to look at the immediate dangers.
Right. Actually, I wanted to break in and went to this a little bit to look at Jasper right now. We don't have a tornado warning on this, but I am seeing a little bit of concerning rotation with this storm out here. It is actually, I believe, right in this little notch right here that we're looking at a little bit of rotation. It's a little bit east of Jasper again. No tornado confirmed here, no tornado warning, but again, these storms can spin up something very quickly here. So that's why we sort of wanted to look at this right now. It's moving off towards the east. This is part of this larger line here, and that's what we were talking about earlier. These sort of these systems here can really spin up a storm very quickly. That's the thing with these QLCS, or quasi-linear convective systems here. That's what they can do, is they can just vary in these little notches, sort of produce a system here. So I'm looking at the rotation right now, and it seems that there is just a little bit of broader rotation here. Nothing, again, characteristic of a tornado immediately happening right now. But Zach, I'd like for you to tell me a little bit more about this storm right here, what you think of it, and why exactly we are so concerned about these QLCS sort of spin-up tornadoes if one does happen here. I want to sort of emphasize that. We're not saying one is happening, we're just saying we have an area of concern around here for a potential QLCS tornado.
Well, part of the risk tonight is the fact that these things are so hidden. It can be very difficult. Let me bring up my arrow again here. It can be very difficult because lots of things can look like circulations, and whenever you get these embedded storms within the QLCS, it's not a supercell. It's not easily discernible by itself. So let me bring it back right here. So the arrow is, so this also looks like a hook. There's also little nubs and nodules within the line itself. I can't see the rotation. I can't put it on screen for you all, unfortunately. But there's a lot of just embedded rotation in the atmosphere itself right now.
Exactly.
Things are turning a lot with height. There's a lot of shear. So, you know, the threat is always going to be there until all the storms are done, basically is what you need to know.
Right, exactly. As we were looking, we use a tool called soundings here, and that has showed us a whole lot of shear right before today. In fact, tonight it seemed like there was even particularly a little bit more. And we like to use, as sort of Zach was describing earlier, CAPE as a sort of good tool to tell where we're going to see the most severe storms. But we don't really have a lot of that as we're going into the overnight hours here, because CAPE is really influenced by daytime heating. But we do actually have a lot of shear here that might actually overcome that fact, and I'll produce some of these potential tornadoes here. I want to sort of emphasize that fact that we are not saying something's on the ground here, but potentially, as he was saying here, it's very hard to predict these, it's very hard to conflict these, which is why we are very concerned about this, and are going to keep covering this system right here, because it is entering a favorable environment for tornadoes. Right around here, we're seeing, again, these sort of notches in here, where you can see a quick spin up. And it might not sound like a lot, a quick spin up, but that could be still a tornado that damages. If you are in a mobile home right now, anywhere in this area, I just make sure you are on high alert and you have an area you could go if you're under a tornado warning, because any of these systems could just spawn tornado very quickly, potentially even before a tornado warning is issued. So that's the sort of bad part about these QLCS sort of squall line. You've probably heard that term a lot. Squall line storms around here is they can really spin up a tornado very quickly. And as you can see here, this is probably no tornado warnings live right now. We're not looking at anything particular right now, but we are still watching many of these storms for potential threat. And this storm, one good thing about this storm down here is that it has sort of decreased on the threat. So that is one good thing for you guys here. Sycamore, if I told you guys out towards Anniston, all of you guys near potentially Talladega, the threat has decreased for you with that storm. So don't take this as a don't be prepared anymore. I'm just going to not prepare. Make sure you're still ready to go to a place if a tornado warning is issued. But that threat has decreased for you as the rotation has overall decreased over there. So as this is sort of the big setup here, we don't have any live tornadoes, but we will continue to keep you updated and break in if there is any sort of overlying circulation here or any tornado warnings issued. So now I'm going to pass things off to Chandler to talk more about today's overall situation.
That's right, Robert. Today's situation has been quite brutal. We've seen multiple storms that have barreled their way through central and south Alabama, and like just training over the exact area that this bow echo is now smacking as well. It's been an unfortunate series of events for eastern Mississippi and especially central and into south Alabama. Looking at tomorrow, the threat will continue for parts of Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. Starting at about 9 to 10 a.m., we'll see those showers roll in, pretty messy and disorganized, in fact, once you get into the North Carolina region. But looking at Georgia, you see that squall line that starts to make its way through, and you really can see that by about 9 a.m., it really already roll in. And it's basically its own momentum is carrying it through Georgia, and because of this being a high shear event, it does not necessarily matter just how much CAPE there is. So we can see a potential outbreak in the morning, although it's less likely than what we've seen today. Again, you can see that bow echo that's currently barreling through Alabama, and it will make its way to Georgia later tonight. And once it gets to Georgia, that will be a dangerous situation. But we can also look currently at the conditions in New Orleans. We can see that there is a lot of lightning-producing cells within this squall line. And of course, lightning, most of us think, oh, it's fine, it's whatever, it won't hurt me. But there are a few facts that you should know about lightning. One fact in particular is that lightning, once it strikes your home, can still carry a current through your home. And if you're taking a shower, you're doing dishes, you're doing anything that involves touching water or touching something that's electronic, that's connected to an outlet, that does provide a potential for that current from the lightning to carry over into your body. So if you are in this bow echo, and in that particular spot in the bow echo where it's striking at like 328 strikes per second kind of idea, you need to be able to go into like a part of your home that's away from glass, away from these plumbing and these electrical outlets, so that you do not run the risk of potentially getting struck by lightning while still being in your home. And of course, if you're outside, get inside. Don't sit underneath a tree. That's the worst possible idea. And obviously, don't carry a big metal rod with you. But this is still an extremely dangerous event, and I'm expecting that most everybody has gotten inside by now with that bow echo. But anyway, that is still a major threat. And with the bow echo, there's the other threat of torrential rain. So flash floods. Of course, with flash floods, one of the major things that you have to be aware of is the potential for flooding on roads, and that can carry over into the morning hours tomorrow. So if you are driving for some reason tonight or into tomorrow, make sure that you are aware of the potential for flooded roads. If you are driving, try to choose roads that you know won't flood. So a lot of interstates are pretty well designed and keep from flooding. But if you are at all in any of these regions that have seen torrential rainfall, then avoid trying to drive on those back roads. Even if they do get you to work quicker, it may end up putting you in a situation where you have to decide if you want to be late to work or drive through a flooded road, which of course always turn around, don't drown. So please, if you are in one of those situations, choose to take a different route, even if it does put you late to work or late to go to somebody's house. Whatever event you're trying to reach, make sure that you take this into account. And of course, again, with this squall line, there is that strong winds. So whenever this squall line is pushing through and the soil is already saturated, we have the potential for large trees to topple down, or even other structures that might not be firmly cemented into the ground. But now I'm going to toss things back off to Zach to look at our current situation.
Yeah, thanks, Chandler. And I just wanted to show everyone the size of the system. We're kind of hyping and talking a lot about Mississippi and Alabama, and that's certainly where the tornado threat has been greatest and will be greatest into the overnight. But just take a look here between Wichita, St. Louis, Cincinnati. We're seeing these, stratiform kind of rain showers. But, in some of these areas, we actually saw tornadoes in the areas that weren't necessarily, hit too heavily by all the warnings and all of the hype online maybe. Between Springfield and Wichita today, there were several severe weather reports, and thankfully things have kind of calmed down there now. Still have some heavier rain there. Let me turn the lightning on for you. We still have a few lightning strikes there, just north of Springfield and west of St. Louis. A couple of embedded strikes there, but just some really heavy rain over here towards Mount Pleasant, Osage Beach, up towards Sedalia, Harrisonville. You guys are going to see probably an inch or two of rain out of this. It's really raining, nice moderate showers and nothing too moving anywhere too quickly. Over here towards Rolla and St. Francois, a little bit more in the way of some storms popping up. Carbondale, Mount Vernon, Cape Girardeau, you guys are seeing some thunder showers tonight as well. Thankfully, the severe threat in this area is tapering off, especially compared to areas farther to the south. Zooming over here towards Nashville, if you're going across on I-40 tonight in Tennessee, you're just having a wet commute of it. Thankfully, like I said, the severe threat continues to diminish, but man, just the whole stretch of I-40 right now, from Nashville to Knoxville, all the way to the North Carolina line right now, it is just soggy. Even over here towards Charlotte, you guys are starting to get in on some of the showers, and expect that to continue as we go into the next day or so with tomorrow's severe threat. So again, I'm going to zoom in down here, northern Alabama right now. Huntsville, going straight down 65 to Coleman and to Birmingham. We had a couple of tornadoes in this area today. Right now, thankfully, no apparent areas of rotation or major rotation or indicators of tornadoes right now, but the lightning is still there. Now, besides the lightning just looking cool and indicating thunderstorms, lightning can also help determine where some of these storms are going to be the most intense. So storms that are rapidly intensifying will show an increase in the amount of lightning strikes. So it is kind of interesting from time to time to sample a general area, and we can do that right here. Say, okay, well, around the Birmingham area, how many strikes? 48 in the last 15 minutes. So not too crazy, especially for, you know, some kind of quasi-linear system like this. When we have these little embedded cells, it's not that solid straight up and down line necessarily. So just something to keep in mind. We'll keep watching it for you. Go ahead and get rid of this. And we'll move on to the south and take a look at what is now rapidly evolving to become our biggest threat, which is the Bow Echo line. If I animate this again too, you see moving pretty quickly over the last hour or so. Zoom into some of these areas right now. Selma, you guys have, you know, gotten already potentially one confirmed tornado today. The rotation moved right over town. I hope everyone, you know, they're in my thoughts and prayers. I hope everyone there is doing all right tonight. Between Selma and Greenville, Monroeville, you know, you guys have already seen thunderstorms today. If you manage to escape the tornado, the straight line winds are now coming for you as well. So this is, you know, beating people when they're already down. It's kind of a rough situation. Thomasville has already had this line move in. We're talking about 60, 70, maybe potentially 80-mile-an-hour winds. You know, it's not a tornado, but it's still definitely enough to cause some damage to your home. Monroeville down towards Waggerville and Citronelle, you know, there's another severe thunderstorm warning. Also for this area, this light yellow, by the way, this is our tornado watch. So we'll have to look and see if areas over here towards Troy, Andalusia, Crestview, you know, the watch continues to the east. I imagine it will be. The SPC has, you know, continually said that the risk threat level continues over here. And this severe thunderstorm warning is until 9:45 Central Time. So you've still got a few more minutes there on that one. Moving a little bit farther south before we pass things off, however, let's zoom on down here. Gulfport over here towards Mobile. You guys are going to be sitting this line here in the next little bit. Let me go ahead and put the tracker up there for you. And drag us off to the east once again, right around that 60-mile-an-hour mark or so. So Gulfport by 9:21, D'Iberville by 9:26, Biloxi by 9:30. So you guys have around that 10 to 15-minute time period in Biloxi to start making those preparations. Could have some gusty winds. If you have outdoor furniture or pets outside right now, good idea maybe to bring those inside and prepare for some of these stronger to more severe storms. So Chandler, you know, and Robert, you guys, are we really seeing the evolution kind of from the discrete threat over towards the quasi-linear threat and the Bow Echo?
It's actually really great that you mentioned that, because the Storm Prediction Center actually just released a new mesoscale discussion, particularly for the northern half of Alabama. They're noting the fact that this is sort of transitioned to a linear mode, as you were saying. These are sort of cellular cells, but now they're sort of gone to a linear mode. And they're saying the tornado threat still exists, however, the storm because of the shear. So Chandler, this is sort of an interesting development here, the fact that these have gone mostly linear.
That is right, yes. Because of the fact that we have a broad system, a broad cold front that is sweeping behind, we have this more linear form of threat that is pushing its way through Mississippi and into Alabama, and it's about to head into Georgia. And actually, interestingly enough, as it makes its way throughout the night and into the morning, some of the models hint at it bringing a possible bit of snow to the upper elevations in the Appalachian Mountains. So we see that this system is basically a mixed bag of basically everything that you could possibly look to have for as far as severe weather goes, and even some winter weather. The only thing we're missing is tropical weather, but we'll get into that come May and June. Looking at the satellite, you can see there's a pocket of what maybe is snow. We'll see. Maybe it's just being fake. I don't know for sure. But, well, we maybe see some snow in Wichita. It's a good, yes. Okay, so it is confirmed. All right, that is very interesting that it's surrounded by rain, but we have a pocket of snow. However, that is quite a great image to show just how crazy of an event this is. We have severe weather off to the east, and then we have snow in a pocket over in Wichita, Kansas. So, of course, this whole entire system has brought conditions ranging from extremely severe tornadoes that we have had over 21 plus tornadoes, 21. and over 60, close to over 70 at this point, warnings, tornado warnings. And most of them actually have been in a couple linear fashions, not linear as in a cold front, but linear as in a train. And I think I've been bringing up this so much that I probably need to describe what causes this. Typically, what happens is you have this pocket of CAPE, like we've been talking about, storm juice, conductive available potential energy is what it's called, and it basically starts off this spree of storms. And so one storm forms, and it starts going northeast, and it strengthens, and then it dies. But as it dies, it has this outflow boundary. It basically, as it dies, it lets out its last breath, and its last breath, along with more of that CAPE, produces this strong storm. And then you have this domino effect and just more and more trains of storms that just keep on moving over the region. And we saw a couple examples of this between Tuscaloosa, Alabama and Birmingham, and then of course Demopolis and Selma, both of which have seen confirmed tornadoes and many, many warnings. But I'll toss things back off to Robert to talk more about these conditions.
Right, thank you, Chandler. Of course, we have a major situation underway here still. It has transitioned to a linear mode, as we were talking about here, which is a damaging wind threat, which of course, you know, we talk about tornadoes a lot. Tornadoes are very popular, or not popular, they're very well known, in American popular culture. So when you hear a tornado, you know that's dangerous. But damaging straight line winds, not necessarily as much. And that's one interesting fact of this here is we're looking at these dew points, very wet here. It's what's causing this. But we're talking about what it is here, but it's very dry over the rest of the nation. So looking at this, 65 Tallahassee, 65 New Orleans, 60 Memphis, these are very uncharacteristically dewy points here for most of the southeast here. But look, as close as Dallas, my hometown, 36 degrees. So a lot drier here. We sort of want to go over the national to really contextualize what's going on here in the southeast here. So you can see 40s, 30s for most of us in the rest of the nation. And that's really interesting there. It's causing this severe weather setup in the southeast. And actually, that's one reason why we're seeing so many storms here is because you can see we're on the 70s here in most of the southeast here with places like Selma, places like Montgomery, places like Talladega, all these places around here that are seeing high dew points. But we are seeing fairly windy conditions too along with this low system here, looking at 22, yes, that's right, 22 miles per hour in New Orleans, 12 in Tallahassee, 13 in Memphis. These are very windy conditions along with this front here that's really kind of sort of the southerly flow is kicking up this moisture, also kicking up this CAPE earlier in the day. We're really kicking up all the sort of ingredients that we had to have for the high risk curve. It's actually still in place for most of the southeast. Rest of the nation seeing a lot of 1 and 2 on the wind speed here. So honestly, again, this is a sort of a very sort of southeast versus the rest of the nation here with the severe weather. Now, I mean, Chandler, don't you think this is very, very uncharacteristic of the southeast here to do this in the middle of the spring instead of sort of later when we see as higher dew points?
Yes, exactly. This has been one unusual event, that's for sure. We've had over 40, no, over, one second. Yes, we've had over 70 wind reports. So we've upgraded that wind report mark, that count. It has been upgraded to 70, which this is, of course, thanks to that squall line that's pushing its way through Birmingham. Looking at some of the reports, we have some reports of trees that are down just outside of Birmingham. So again, this is an extremely strong system. Even behind the initial gust front, we are still seeing severe conditions and dangerous conditions because, of course, this has straight line winds and potentially embedded tornadoes, although that is left up to the National Weather Service to decide. Also, we are looking at hail, which has increased its count as well to 40, and we have 4 reports of large hail, which means over 2 inches in diameter. So we've had a few reports of hailstones that are over 2 inches, which that's kind of a lot for the southeast. Of course, once we get out into the Great Plains, they have more potential for those stronger updrafts that carry the hailstones up into the atmosphere and keep them up there longer. And of course, how hail usually forms, you shoot it up into the atmosphere, it starts falling back down, accumulating more moisture and more water, more ice, and but as it's starting to fall, then it pushes back up, and then it freezes and creates these layers of ice around this usually dirty core. Usually it's some sort of stick, dust, or some dirty core, and it just continues to grow. The hailstone does, and of course in the Great Plains this can result in massive hailstones. But here in the southeast we can still see pretty large hailstones. 2 inches is still enough to do quite a bit of damage to your car, quite a bit of damage to your home. And of course, when you combine that with the wind and tornado threats, this has just been really just an incredibly crazy day. And it's not over yet. Of course, we still will see potential flooding that lingers on into the morning, so some of these rivers and creeks will still be flooded, and that means you do need to keep weather aware even after this front passes through. And then, of course, what's passing through you guys in Alabama is just now arriving in Georgia. In Georgia, you guys might not be getting the worst of it. You're still getting quite a massive event that is arguably historic. It definitely marks the 10-year anniversary of the 2011 tornado outbreak. However, it has been quite unique in its own right. Like we've seen, it caused actually some snow showers in Wichita, Kansas, as well as it potentially will cause more snow showers once we get into Appalachian Mountains. But now we'll toss things off to Zach, and he will give us a better description of what's going on.
Yeah, thanks, Chandler. And I wanted to bring everyone's attention here real quick to the new SPC Outlook. Once again, we still have the high risk. They haven't canceled the high risk. So there's still definitely that tornado threat, as well as, of course, the damaging straight line winds and the large hail. However, I want to notice that we have now cut off most of Mississippi. If I move here to the left, anywhere over from Jackson, if I zoom in here, you still have the moderate and the enhanced risk, but once the line passes you, the atmosphere is generally stabilizing and the threat is really going away. So thankfully for them, Memphis over towards Nashville, you guys are still in the slight risk. We still could have a pop-up severe storm up there. The threat not necessarily over by any stretch of the imagination. However, we have a new mesoscale discussion kind of talking about how the storms are transferring from those individual supercells we were seeing throughout the day to more of that linear convective line. So if we're just here east of Montgomery up towards Birmingham, we're looking at Moundville, Duncanville, Demopolis, still in that high risk, at least for the next couple of hours. So still can't rule out, more tornadoes, more damaging winds especially, but this has definitely shifted a little bit now farther to the east, and the western half has really been trimmed. So good news for Mississippi, Alabama, you guys are not out of the woods yet. So how this kind of translates to tomorrow. Now, we won't get tomorrow's storm outlook to update until around 2 a.m. That's around 6 Zulu time, or whenever they update the models according to International Standard Time. That's when the Storm Prediction Center puts out its day 1 outlook. So, but anywhere from Raleigh down towards Charleston, like I said, all down here towards the Outer Banks, you guys are in that enhanced to moderate risk of severe weather. So once again, tornadoes, wind, hail, it's all a threat pretty much everywhere here. So how this kind of transitions, of course, we're not just going to have no severe threat between one and the other. So, how it kind of translates from here to here, and we're going to getting in the middle of that, will be, of course, Atlanta, down towards Tallahassee, of course, tomorrow. We're kind of cut out of the enhanced risk. Things are not going to be quite as unstable down here, but, a damaging wind gust, maybe some small hail, an isolated tornado probably, but our chances are not that good for the tornadoes tomorrow. However, still can't be ruled out. Our Tallahassee tornado this year was during a marginal risk, so it's always important to know if you do have a risk. I mean, it's not zero. So it's always good to pay attention and make sure you know what is going on in your area. Go back here to the line now. It definitely seems to be the biggest factor now. Definitely a good formation of the line. And notice definitely the little kink, the little bow echo there. Very sharp bend back towards the southwest here in southwestern Alabama and southeastern Mississippi there. I-65, this is approaching you. If you're on I-65 tonight, going south out of Montgomery, heading towards I-10, especially if you're in a large, high-profile vehicle, an SUV, a van, anything like that. Might want to consider getting off the road. This line of storm is rapidly approaching you, and it can definitely push you off the highway.
Hey, with that bow echo, that kind of reminds me of when I was back in DFW. We often get these sort of systems that are bow echoes coming into here, and that sort of notch, as he just pointed out, is where we're sort of looking for these tornadoes that could potentially form in that area. So again, I just wanted to mention that because that is honestly an area of concern here. But again, the damaging wind threat is the biggest one as areas go south to here, because the rotation isn't as big of a threat, but damaging winds, like I said earlier, is not as big a threat. So yeah, as Zach, as like you were saying, that's honestly a very big concern as this sort of begins to organize more and more, like you were saying.
Absolutely, yeah, here between New Orleans, like I said, between New Orleans and up here towards Biloxi, Mobile, that kind of area, I-10, even I-110 here between, 10 and New Orleans, right now kind of looking like, you guys are going to be in the thick of it. And once again, damaging winds, definitely the primary threat here. Pretty much everywhere. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out tomorrow as well, because we expect this line to kind of stick together. So, especially as we get here towards New Orleans, but some of the models earlier today didn't have this big kink in the line, so it's going to kind of slow things down, maybe by a couple of hours. So Panama City, Pensacola, maybe even over here towards Tallahassee tomorrow. Originally we were thinking, was a wake up in the morning and see the line kind of thing. I think if the line was going straight north-south like it was there just west of Montgomery, that would definitely be the case. But Robert, I think we might be by, tomorrow, we might be talking noontime before this thing really hits us.
Right, exactly, and that sort of messes up the timing for this entire system, because we were sort of expecting this entire line to be like this, like he said, Montgomery straight up, down, north, south, moving here, and it'll get here around, 10 a.m., pretty nice, easy drive where we have a slight risk. But I definitely, we're going to have to look at that. Not sure exactly how this will change our threat. We'll have to see how that looks in the newest model runs. They'll sort of factor this into it, of course. Like we say, these threats are always a little bit unpredictable. The SPC did it great today. They got a good job with this high risk. Usually high risks are some of the most severe events that we ever see, and that was borne out today. I think we can all agree, with over 60 tornado warnings and over 21 confirmed tornadoes. We don't know their strengths yet, but I think we can all agree that this is a very significant, perhaps I would say generational outbreak in Alabama. That will be one to remember. But again, this could, the timing-wise, like I was saying, it's unpredictable. It could move to Tallahassee a little later, and that would definitely be interesting to figure out how that factors into our severe weather outlook. So to Chandler, to talk a little about what our severe weather outlook is for tomorrow.
That's right, yes. So for tomorrow, we're looking at this storm continuing to make its way across Georgia into the Carolinas. This is going to, of course, bring similar conditions, maybe not as strong of conditions going into Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina, but it will potentially still bring strong winds and the potential for a spin-up tornado or two. Of course, we're talking about seeing a level 4 out of 5 expectation for severe weather, and this is extremely dangerous situation. Even still, no, it doesn't have a high risk, which many people overvalue potentially, but it is still an extremely interesting situation, and we'll have to look and see how the SPC reacts to the timing of the storm, because like Robert mentioned, it is shaping a little differently than what the models predicted. And of course, models aren't perfect, but we did see this having a more straight line up and down shape, and it's shaping up to, it basically wants to avoid the Gulf of Mexico for some reason. And it is going to probably make it to us way later than expected. And does this have any influence on Southern Georgia's potential strength and their potential, what they will see tomorrow? We will have to wait and see what the SPC says. However, currently, we still need to stay weather aware. We can look at that available cape, so we still have some of that energy and that juice ahead of the storm. And so we can see that this storm, as it just ramps up tomorrow, or well into the morning hours, we still have that convective available potential energy. And so we still have these storms feeding off of that juice, that strengthening, and we'll see how that affects tomorrow. We can see that there's a few pockets down into Columbus and also getting up towards North Georgia and into the Carolinas. I know we are expecting potentially some discrete cells to form in the Raleigh triad area. So anybody that is watching that might know somebody up in North Carolina, myself, we will have to watch and keep an eye out for discrete cells in the Carolinas. That is something that we are familiar with in the Carolinas, but this timing in particular is odd. Most of the time it's during the night, but we'll see what happens tomorrow. For now, we'll take things back off to Zach to talk more about what's going on.
Yeah, thanks, Chandler. A couple of things here. We've had a recent model update on the run here. I want to take us back through this really quick. Notice tonight at around 3 o'clock in the morning, so 90% of the population to 95% are asleep. Everybody who's not working the midnight shift, is probably at least in bed, if not, asleep, unconscious. They're not going to be paying attention to what's happening outside. It is noting we could get some, between Birmingham and Mobile, redevelopment of some clusters of storms. Still kind of linear, but also kind of by themselves. So we'll have to look and see how that plays out. But also here too, we're talking 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, big clusters and pockets of storms and heavy rain. Any of these could potentially be severe between Columbus and Atlanta. This is 7 o'clock in the morning. This isn't peak severe weather season, peak severe weather time of the day like, most people would expect. And then zooming, of course, later in, we're talking about 9, 10 o'clock. Once again, still not when most people expect. And we can already start to see there in northeast Georgia, these kind of individual popping cells start way earlier than you may expect. Parts of South and North Carolina too then, as Chandler was talking about, that's his neck of the woods, and he gets to miss the severe weather event, sadly. But good for, too bad for them that have to deal with it. Hopefully the tornado threat won't be quite as high, but unfortunately the model is once again indicating here, around that drive home tomorrow, potentially some tornadic supercellular storms anywhere here from Raleigh to Greensboro, up towards Norfolk, Newport News, maybe even up towards Richmond. Once again, pretty far north with this air mass, talking about these potentially tornadic cells. So definitely very problematic, and the model is already hinting this many hours out, these kind of supercellular storms all the way out, and then hopefully by 9, 10 o'clock tomorrow night, things are not going to be too terribly bad. All right, I was just handed a bulletin here. We need to look at a storm, Centerville, southwest of Birmingham, so we're going to zip on over to the radar with Robert.
Right, we do have a little bit of an area of concern we are looking at right now. Again, this is, like we like to say, not tornado warned right now, but this is one thing that's sort of a classic feature of these sort of bow echoes. Major threat, damaging winds, but you have these little kinks right here that form, and you can have a little bit of rotation right here. And on my system right here, there is a little bit of indication that there is a little bit of rotation right there right now. Again, not tornado warned. National Weather Service not saying there's a tornado there. But if you are in Brent, if you're in Centerville, if you're in these areas just west of I-65, around US 82, you need to be sort of considering getting to your safe place just in case, because right now this is one of the main features that the National Weather Service uses to confirm tornado warnings, confirm whether tornadoes on the ground, is storm spotters, and we don't really have any of those right now because it is pitch black right now outside. It is 10:39 p.m. and it's very dark outside. Rain-wrapped tornado is what the system could potentially bring up. These are going to be very heavy rain, HP high precipitation as we call them. So again, I'm seeing a little bit of rotation here, an area of concern. Don't get too concerned. Don't get too worried about it, because again, I'm not trying to sort of get anybody afraid here. Just sort of saying this is an area we're going to watch over the next few hours. As this little bend is in here, it's going to go towards active around 9:43 p.m., around Jemison around 9:59 p.m., and around the I-65 corridor around 10 p.m. So again, we're watching this as potentially an area of rotation. I'm seeing just a little bit of rotation for the storm. And I actually like to go down near the city of Selma too. I'm seeing a little bit of an interesting feature just north of the city there. Actually, yes, right here. There's a little bit of a bend here just north of the city of Selma. Again, this is not a confirmed for tornado, but I just want to make you guys aware here because these storms can spin up a tornado real quickly. So we're trying to make sure that you guys know where there is the biggest threat of tornado activity here, and this is one of those areas around the city of Selma, Valley Grande. We know this area was heavily impacted by tornadoes earlier today. There was the Dallas County storm that put down a tornado. We know this area is already very raw with tornadoes, but we are still making sure you guys are warned. We're not trying to make you guys afraid, but we're just telling you this is an area we're watching here. I'm seeing just a little bit of rotation on my system here. So again, these things can happen quickly, they can happen fast, and if the National Weather Service pops a tornado warning on either of these, we will tell them you immediately. But areas around here getting towards the US 82 corridor, probably within the next 30 to 40 minutes. Biggest threat right now confirmed is these damaging winds, this straight line wind threat coming to you guys. Again, I want to sort of emphasize, no matter if there's a tornado here or not, this is a damaging storm coming into your area right now, and you need to act like there is one. All of these areas from along, just coming towards the system, basically along the I-65 corridor from Birmingham to Montgomery down to Forest Home and Monroeville. All of you need to be taking to your safety precautions now. These storms are going to be very strong as they come into your areas, and they're going to pack a punch with these damaging winds. They may not be severe level yet, but again, they're going to blow over items outside, and they're going to make it not safe conditions to be outside right now. So make sure you are inside when these storms come through. And particularly where you see this bow right here. I've said bow echo a lot tonight. There's a reason. These storms are known around this bow to have a good amount of damaging winds. So again here, we're watching a system here that could potentially spin up a tornado, maybe around up to the north, maybe around Selma, maybe around this area. Again, we are not fully certain on this yet. We will tell you when we are, if there is a tornado. But right now, again, we are just sort of seeing the system. And Zach, I mean, we're seeing just a sort of overall setup here, something that is still a very high risk. So talk to us more about the entire setup here today.
Yeah, and here towards the line too, we kind of have an interesting feature here. Right around Thermopolis down towards Thomasville, we're having, it looks like heavy rain. So, you know, moderate to heavy rain, and there's almost a hole in the line between Selma and Demopolis. So if I pause this right now, very light returns here, bring the pointer out. It's pretty easy to see, but not a whole lot in the way of shower and storm activity in this region. And then we have another redevelopment here over towards Butler, Thomasville, and Demopolis. It's kind of interesting just to see how that pops up. Some of the models earlier today were kind of talking about a secondary line maybe forming between the two. Right now, it's definitely turned linear now, and the line continues to pick up in intensity as it approaches the Montgomery area. But it'll be interesting to see if that kind of like little massive heavy rain, you know, turns into something.
Right, exactly. And as you were saying, we're watching potentially the risk of storms behind this front maybe becoming stronger. That's one reason why we're watching this. Potentially could be something. But another risk here, because this has not been talked a lot, not even in this broadcast and a lot of other sources too, is, as Chandler mentioned earlier, the flash flood risk here. We have a few flash flood warnings right now for a lot of Alabama and Mississippi, particularly to the north, but there are some here in the south too. And like Zach mentioned, there's this pocket of heavy rain that's sort of developing behind here. And we like to mention all of the risks that are going to affect you. That's one of the things we do here at FSU Weather. We try to make sure that you are safe. And the thing is here, a lot of people try to focus on tornadoes. They focus on large hail. But damaging winds, flash flooding, these are just as deadly. If you get caught in a flash flood and you are in high water that is even as like 4, 5, 6 inches, these areas will still potentially see a flooding that could blow over a car or knock over a car, excuse me. These are areas that could be very dangerous. So make sure that you know where you're driving, and if you see water, like Chandler said, turn around, don't drown. It's a little bit, it might sound stupid at first, but it's a good memo to remember. Turn around, don't drown. If you are near these areas with flash flooding, these are areas that are going to be potentially very dangerous, particularly around creeks and particularly around rivers. These areas are going to be ones to watch because we are, again, watching a very heavy rain event coming in. We have this first line. We have a lot of rain developing, and again, behind this line is going to make this very dangerous conditions around the I-65 corridor, particularly right now around Huntsville. We know you didn't really see a lot in the way of severe weather earlier, but that doesn't mean you're out of the neck of the woods right now. All this flash flooding could be very dangerous for your city, and that's why we have 2 flash flood watches in here, one for the entire sort of Tennessee Valley into Alabama region, and one for the south here into Montgomery and sort of central Alabama. So again, looking at all this rain here, you can see this big sort of area of rain up here and this big sort of developing rain down here. And again, with the line gives you so much rain with this here. But again, we are watching a flash flood potential threat, and we're watching the potential for maybe a spin up or two. We will tell you whenever that happens. But right now, Chandler, tell us more about this entire situation and any interesting features that you thought about with this system that might not have been mentioned yet.
That's right, yes. So currently we can talk about the areas we know where tornadoes have struck. We have seen in Waynesboro, Mississippi, which was one of the first places that we saw tornado warnings spawn up today. And that particular region saw multiple warnings, and we know for a fact that they got struck by a tornado. We do not know what the rating of the tornado is. However, we still do know that it did touch down in Waynesboro, Mississippi. And of course, currently you can see that they are finally out of the woods there. You can see that the line is finally moving out of Waynesboro, and it's moving out of most of Mississippi in general. So you can really see that they're only dealing with light rain now. Hopefully they were able to bear down, the people in Waynesboro were able to bear down whenever the straight line winds burst through. And hopefully they avoided the worst of the tornado that struck. The next area that we know that a tornado did touch down was Burnsville, Alabama. Burnsville, Alabama, we also saw today had multiple tornado warnings that lined up across the region and across that local area. And of course, this spot in particular was hit by a tornado. We do not know what the rating of the tornado was. However, we do know for a fact that we have a tornado touchdown in that region. And then we also saw in Billingsley, Alabama. So later on tonight, we have been covering Billingsley, and we know for a fact that they have gotten a tornado touchdown. We do not know the strength of the tornado. It could have been an EF0, EF1. God forbid it be higher than that. But we do know for a fact that either by radar or by a spotter, we do know that there was a touchdown there. Also, Clayton, Alabama, saw another tornado touchdown, at least one. I think that one actually might have seen a couple. And of course, that is due to the fact that we had this train of storms that just kept on going and barreling through that town. I know for a fact, looking at the map and seeing how many warnings barreled through that area, we saw there was at least 10 or so warnings that were in and around that city. So, of course, we had multiple supercells that just kept on pummeling that region, and it was inevitable that one of them would drop a tornado. We also saw Moundville, Alabama, that saw a tornado as well, and Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Let's pause there for a second. Tuscaloosa, of course, we were monitoring that this afternoon, and that one did, obviously, we have video evidence of it touching down in Tuscaloosa, and we do not know what it will be rated as, but that is not the concern. The concern is more for what it did safety-wise, and I do know that it did cut off some utilities to people's homes and apartments, so it did do some damage to the city. We'll have to see how much damage that was and what that will affect when it comes to the rating of the tornado, but we do know that there was a tornado that touched down in Tuscaloosa, and that one in particular was quite characteristic of this outbreak. It was one of the ones that was very visual, and it was something that we were able to see pretty clearly, and we could see that the damage it caused. But we'll talk now, we'll toss it back to Robert at the wall.
Right, thank you, Chandler. Yeah, like you're saying, this is an overall setup here, and like I wanted to mention again here, like we're looking again, maybe potential spin-ups here, but again, nothing confirmed. So the overall situation here is one that we are looking at mainly damaging winds, particularly for you guys along the I-65 corridor. The big concern right now for you guys in Montgomery is this damaging winds that's going to come with this line here. It's not severe level. I want to make sure that you guys know that. It's not severe level, but we are warning you guys right now because this is going to be still a bow echo right here, and as it makes its way into Greenville, Montgomery and Clan, it will blow quite a few things around. So make sure you guys are prepared as this line of storms does make its way in. Selma, you guys are now behind the line again. You probably just had a big sort of dump of rain there. but you are going to have more with this sort of developing core of rain around Demopolis is going to make its way towards Selma and Montgomery. So again, this is going to be potentially a flash flood threat. That's why this flash flood watch is in effect for you guys here. So again, we're watching, making sure you guys are well known that this could be a potential flash flood threat, as probably the biggest threat here now is flash flood. There's a flash flood warning over here and a flash flood watch for this entire area, because there's going to be a lot of rain that's going to be dumping here and a lot of rain behind the line. But again, of course, this overall situation here, it's been quite a day for Alabama here in Mississippi. It's been quite a historic day. We saw over 60 tornado warnings for the state. We saw over around 21 confirmed tornadoes so far. The National Weather Service, of course, will do their damage assessments tomorrow, and we'll sort of get a more accurate count on that number. But right now we are again seeing the sort of byproduct of the system now here, this sort of secondary line that's coming in. It's going to affect places like Montgomery, Braggs, Greenville, Prattville. This entire area is going to be affected by this damaging wind system. It was severe warned earlier, but no longer. Actually, I just said that, and there's a severe thunderstorm warning now. I just said that there's a severe thunderstorm warning now. So I'm going to actually check into my system to see what it's about, but I'm pretty sure it's damaging winds for you guys in Montgomery. So it hasn't loaded into my system yet. That's how hot off the press this is right now. But you guys in Montgomery, you are now under a severe thunderstorm warning until 11 o'clock p.m. Central Time. This is going to be for your damaging winds with a straight line wind system. And you're also going to see some hail right here. So again, severe thunderstorm warning for Montgomery, areas to points north and south along the I-65 corridor. So we're making sure that you guys are well known that this is a dangerous situation with these damaging winds. It's now severe level. So again, Zach, tell us more about this situation right here that is rapidly developing just west of Montgomery.
Yeah, right. I wanted to get some information here. It might not necessarily pop up, but here on the system I can read until 11 p.m. Central Time. We got 60-mile-an-hour wind gusts with the system. Radar indicated. This is enough to damage roofs, trees, parts of your house, especially mobile homes, manufactured homes, maybe not quite to the same level as a brick or stone home. Just kind of going to play this out here. You can see how the line is really intensified in just the last couple of frames. I'm going to go ahead and put the lightning back on here. And notice how we have had a good amount of lightning resurgence here just in the last couple of slides. So I'm going to back this up a little bit. Down here, back in time a little bit, there was still some lightning, but there were some holes in the lightning. Now we have pretty much the entire area covered in the lightning. So once again, once you see the lightning kind of resurgence, we kind of know the line is re-intensifying. And if you watch the screen closely, you'll see more lightning strikes are going to start filling in as they're recorded. So over here through time, but yeah, Montgomery, looks like you're really going to take this one on the chin. Once again, 60-mile-an-hour wind gusts or so. Not necessarily recording any hail with this system, thankfully. Looks like it's smaller than 3/4 of an inch, according to the warning, so that is excellent news. At least you won't be dealing with that. Thankfully, the hail threat was more displaced off to the west, and that was an earlier threat, an earlier kind of event. But yes, Montgomery right now, you guys are probably going to be taking this one on the chin the next few minutes or so. We'll go ahead and zoom in here a little bit closer. Take a look at our now. Over towards Whitehall, Hayneville, Braggs, you are in the thick of it right now. If you still have power and can hear me, and you're in this area right now, shout out to you guys. Another couple minutes or so, it's going to be kind of rough. Let me drag the thing out down here. And right around that 60-mile-an-hour mark or so, this is moving almost due east. Yeah, Montgomery, 10:17. So you guys have around 20 minutes or so, 20 to 25 minutes to really get yourself in a safe place, get your outside outside loose objects from becoming dangerous projectiles in the wind. There's another huge cluster of lightning right there around Mosses. You guys are in it right now, if not getting it in the next minute or so. So Prattville, Clanton, once again, these areas that already dealt with potential tornadoes earlier today now are dealing with this straight line wind threat. Thankfully, like I said, the hail is not necessarily the issue right now, but Chandler, Robert, this is going to continue through the evening. It looks like this line is really just intensifying.
Right, exactly. You're watching an intensifying line here. That's one of the hallmarks of these sort of these sort of lines here as they move their way into the region right now. There you can see as it makes its way into Montgomery, this sort of bow echo right here, I meant bow echo when I said dry line, but they are both lines, so close enough. But this dry line right here, bow echo as it's moving its way towards Montgomery, Actually, that severe thunderstorm warning has just been extended. I will get to that in just a second. But the reason why this is actually sort of getting more warnings on it now is this sort of bow echo. It sort of bows out. And the area where it bows the most is where it usually strengthens. And you can see that, like as Zach said, with the lightning activity. But this new severe thunderstorm warning until 10:45. The first one is for Autauga, Elmore, Chilton, Lowndes, Montgomery, and Coosa County until 11 p.m. Winds and about just under an inch of hail. So hail is not the biggest threat. But again, the I-65 corridor around Montgomery going south of Birmingham, you guys need to be taking precautions because this is now a severe level threat with 60-mile-per-hour winds. Take cover because this storm is packing a punch of a potentially even a weekend tornado if this does continue to strengthen here as it gets to the I-65 corridor. Again, usually tornadoes are thought of as the biggest threat, but damaging winds, now a severe level, can of course pack that punch. The second one until 10:45 p.m. That one is actually still a very damaging winds threat. Is moving east at 50 miles per hour. Hail is under an inch of hail, but we are actually still seeing 60-mile-per-hour winds with this warning right here. And they're basically extending this right now with the bow echo here. That's, as it strengthens, we're sort of seeing it re-strengthen. Earlier, it sort of fell kind of a little bit apart. It was sort of kind of breaking up a little bit as it was towards Demopolis. But now we're seeing this re-strengthen a little bit towards Montgomery. We're seeing these storms sort of pack this punch as they sort of organize. You can see as it's a little messier up here and a messier down here. These are not the severe ends, but these areas where you see this line right here go right into here. That's where it's sort of you see this biggest straight line wind, this biggest damaging wind threat for you guys, and it's going to be coming into Montgomery very soon in here. The timeline is going to be very quick for you guys around the I-65 corridor. So again, take cover right now. Make sure you're taking your precautions. And again, this is probably the biggest threat with this storm system right now. We're seeing potentially damaging straight line winds. And also, I am getting potentially concerned about towards this other area up here. The circulation area seems to be getting a little broader with this notch up here. Again, not a confirmed tornado, nothing confirmed there, but this circulation out here seems to get just a little bit broader as it makes its way south of Birmingham City. This little notch right here in the line. There seems to be a fairly big area of broad circulation. If it tightens itself up, that could be a problem. If it stays broad, it probably won't be. So again, the biggest threat with these storms is damaging winds, heavy rain that could cause flash flooding, and also maybe some small, around 0.75-inch hail. But again, Chandler, this system is a very strong system, and it still has a lot of potency in it. It's not dying out anytime soon.
That's right. And I will say there are parts of the meteorology community that have been calling this potentially a bust because of the end of the warnings that we've seen. But the fact of the matter is this has been an event that is both taken property and hopefully it hasn't taken any lives, but at least it's scared a bunch of people into preparing for the worst. This has been a major event, even if some people don't define it as such. This has been one for the history books. Hopefully, if it does not cause any fatalities, we can all look back on it and smile at the fact that everybody did what they needed to do, and we can all sit happy knowing that we did not see anyone die. I have not seen any, of course, casualties yet, so hopefully that is a good sign. The other thing to talk about with this system, as it moves out, tomorrow while you're out, you'll probably want to report anything that you see to the National Weather Service damage-wise. We want to get as much data as possible collected. Now, when you report, you can tell them a description of such. And one of the interesting things you can tell them, you can look for this damage, and if it is, let's say, some trees that are down. If the trees are down and they're both, like multiple trees are down, but they're down in a straight line, so all of them are parallel to each other, that indicates straight line winds. It's everything just knocking down, no twisting and twirling. However, if you start seeing trees and damage and debris that's creating X's and creating intersections where things are going down at different angles, and we have this just hot mess of multiple X's and Y's, and you see a bunch of crisscrosses basically in damage, that could be a sign of tornadoes. So if you are reporting any damage, please make sure that you include those factoids for the National Weather Service so that if that damage and debris is potentially manipulated by a cleanup crew or somebody that needs to get the work and, of course, the road's blocked, the National Weather Service can at least log that in and potentially still use that data. But again, this has been an extremely historic event and something that has been quite dangerous. Thankfully, I still have not seen any lists of fatalities or casualties with this, this system and this outbreak, which is a great contrast from 2011. So thankfully, we have handled this outbreak quite well, and Alabama is not reliving entirely what has happened in 2011. But back to you, Robert, with that look at that bow echo.
Right, exactly. We still have these warnings active right now. We're talking about an active severe weather situation still in Alabama. This situation is going to be increasing throughout the night as this bow echo continues to strengthen. We actually have a new warning I was going to point out here just near Gulfport and Pascagoula. This storm is a 60-mile-per-hour wind gust like these other ones. You can see that we had no warnings on the system, right, for about 30 minutes there, and now it's starting to ramp up again. That's how the bow echoes usually happen, is they sort of cycle almost like tornadoes, but with the fact that they have strength with these. So you can see we have one big severe thunderstorm warning, with this Montgomery area, one sort of medium size and another one down here, all for 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts. So again, we're watching this major situation developing here that we're going to continue to watch. Maybe a spin up or two, but that's not the biggest stuff they're watching right now. Maybe damaging wind gusts. So Zach, exactly. This situation is continuing to be one that we're watching. So tell us why exactly that we're continuing to watch this system. This is going to be one that's going to be watched throughout the night and into the day tomorrow.
It's really a nowcasting kind of event. If we look here towards Montgomery, there's obviously a real definitive nice line right here.
Yep.
Over here, just to the north and west of 65. Then we have a weak area, kind of between the two lines. Then we have an area just north and west between New Orleans, right along that I-59, that also seems to be really re-intensifying.
Yep.
So what kind of happens in that in-between area? Is it two distinct lines that are going to reform overnight? Could there be spin-ups between the two lines? Right here, if we zoom in, Monroeville, Jackson, these little kind of popper cells here in the middle, could that be something that tries to fire up? Not a great chance, but it could happen. It's something that has to be watched.
Right.
But a lot of the models have hinted at potentially two lines really forming in between the areas here, if I get the pointer out, such as this becoming a primary line, and then this becoming a primary line, and then kind of this weak area in the middle. So we'll be really interested to see how this plays out as we go into the overnight hours.
Right, and if we have these sort of two lines developing here, we could have an interesting situation for us here in Tallahassee. Of course, we are at the Tallahassee studios. For those of you who haven't watched us before, we are here in Tallahassee, so we do have a local audience that we're also going to be talking to. This could be an interesting situation for us here because this could be an almost two setup for us. We sort of predicated this whole severe weather event tomorrow on the fact that this one line is going to be what comes to us. But if it breaks up and it's this 1 and 2 line, it could really interestingly influence, and we'll have to see how the models work with that with tomorrow, and we will keep you updated on that. But again, like he's saying, like Zach was saying, this line is strengthening here. That's why we have now 3 warnings on it for Montgomery, for Gulfport, for Pascagoula. We are watching this storm as it continues. So again, Zach, tell us the fact that we do still, as you were saying, spin-ups here. Tell us why we're watching for maybe spin-ups here, particularly in this area up here where it's sort of this notch. Tell us why a sort of straight line has that sort of effect there.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have this straight line wind. We have a couple of different threats here, like he said, and depending on what exactly happens here in Tallahassee tomorrow, the models might not exactly get this quite correct. And so this is kind of where the human has to step in. It's kind of like a pilot flying an airplane. 99% of the time, the autopilot can take over, and there's not really a big deal. But when there's an emergency, you don't really want the computer necessarily making all the decisions. And so this is what, the closest thing we would have to an emergency in the sky, which, a nice little allegory there maybe to our tornado threat. This is an emergency, coming from the sky. This is something that, humans really need to take a look at and have some common sense and say, hey, we could potentially have a little bit of a different setup. So Panama City, Tallahassee, be prepared for maybe a couple of rounds of severe weather as we get into the morning tomorrow. That's, the main threat is going to be there's damaging winds. Can't rule out the isolated tornado. Can't rule out the possibility of that small to medium-sized hail. However, damaging winds until we get the next like refiring of the severe weather, the addition of the Cape tomorrow. Overnight tonight, of course, our coverage here is about to end in Tallahassee area, but please tune into your local stations. Have a way to get those warnings, watches, and advisories in your local area. Make sure your weather radio has batteries tonight, and keep it near you when you go to bed. Keep your phones charged in case you lose power, and always make sure you have a plan just in case the weather isn't so friendly in your neck of the woods.
Right, exactly. Again, we are watching this setup here. We're still watching for you guys. So if you are in these areas, make sure you stay tuned to our Twitter and other sort of areas, because we are watching sort of potential areas for severe weather here, and we're watching for us here in Tallahassee. So make sure to join us at 6 p.m. to tomorrow to talk more about how this severe weather setup will affect us and how this sort of strengthening system will affect us later into tomorrow. But I'm Robert Zott here with the FSU Weather Storm Team, and we are now ending our severe weather coverage of this. Thank you for joining us tonight.